Hello, everybody. This is episode 297, and my guest today visited the Institute of Neurological Recovery in Boca Raton, Florida, run by Dr. Edward Tobinick, to receive 2 injections of Etanercept, also known as Enbrel. The interview is a step by step retelling of what happened from the moment Andrew learnt about Etanercept, the first consultation, the mission to raise the money for the trip and the procedure, what his deficits were like before the procedure, what happens on the day of the procedure, and what it's like receiving the injections with the medication. You will hear him speak about his deficits immediately after the injection, what happened in the days after the procedure was completed, and what life is like now that he has returned home to New Zealand and resumed daily living. Andrew Stops, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Thank you for requesting to be back. We last spoke at episode 241. That's almost 60 episodes ago. So that is a long time ago. It's more than a year ago. Time flies. Um, and the reason we spoke is because you reached out to share your stroke story, just like many of the people who have been on the show. And you had a stroke in November 2021, and you had no previous symptoms, no idea that perhaps a stroke is on the cards.
No.
And you were also somebody who's recovering from a brain tumor in the past, many years before that.
Yep.
And when we chatted on the stroke, on the interview, we spoke about your symptoms. We spoke about pseudobulbar affect and how you had inappropriate laughing at various times. We spoke about your identity, how that was impacted because you're a musician and there were some things you couldn't do after the stroke. Um, and we spoke about a whole bunch of other things. And since then, you have decided to uh, do some research on entanercept. Entanercept. No, etanercept,
That's right.
which is a medication, lack of a better word, that helps stroke survivors get some uh, improvement in their deficits and seems to be helping people um, get some quality of life back. You are
Yep.
in the United Kingdom.
No, I'm in New Zealand.
You're in New Zealand. I don't
Yep.
know why I thought you were in the United Kingdom.
I don't know why.
Yeah. And you're in New Zealand, and you recently took a trip to the United States where you went to Florida, where I believe the clinic that treats people is there.
Mm-hmm.
You had an experience and you have something to share about that experience. And my first question is, how long ago was it that you were at the clinic for the procedure?
So I was there 6 weeks ago.
Okay.
Um, so I had the shot on the 2nd of February.
Okay.
That really made the difference.
Before you went there, just
Hmm.
tell us what your deficits were.
Um, so I had the fatigue, cognitive fatigue. Um, I had sensory overload, problems regulating my emotions. My tongue was numb and the side of my face was numb. So my speech was a little slurred, I guess. Um, Also, my hand was useless um,
How
before.
what does that mean? How was it not operating? What wasn't it doing?
Oh, it was like moving through molasses. It was so hard to move. Um, yeah. Um, and yeah, that was it. Oh, and I had really, really bad pain in my right calf.
Okay. Just from tightness, tension,
Uh,
spasticity.
a spasticity. So it was like a constant cramp that would gradually, like sometimes get worse and sometimes, lessen, but it was always there. Um,
Okay.
so it made walking and just, yeah, it was very uncomfortable, and it was worse at night.
As far as your lifestyle, music, work, uh, the ability to be you around the house and all those types of things, what weren't you able to do? What were you not able to
Wow.
participate in?
Yeah. Um, Pretty much everything. Um, the fatigue and the sensory overload really precluded me from a lot of things. Um, I couldn't predict when I'd be fatigued. I could have a really busy day the day before and be fine, and I could do nothing and have fatigue, and vice versa. So it was really hard to predict. Um, there were so many places I couldn't go, or if I did go, I could only stay for for a limited amount of time, from a few minutes to maybe half an hour, and then have to leave. So my ability to work was basically nil, um, because I mean I yeah, I couldn't be reliable because I didn't know how it was going to be from one day to the next. And being at home, like even doing housework, I had to really ration out my energy for the day. Um, so yeah, it was hard. It was very hard.
Yeah. And at some point, you heard about Etanercept.
Yep.
What was that like? How did you hear about it? What were you thinking? How did it get you curious about it? Tell us a little bit about that. Oh my God, I better look into this type of procedure or product or service or medication.
Yep. So gee, it would have been probably about 9 months ago. So it's about June last year. I was doing some research into other um, stroke recovery methods, and possible things I could do to help my recovery. Because I was just so frustrated with not being able to do anything. Um, and I came across a YouTube video of a 60 Minutes Australia story that talked about this woman that went to America, and she had all these deficits, and she had this shot, and suddenly she could speak properly, and her arm moved better, and it was a Etanercept. And I knew then at that moment I have to do this. I have to try this shot.
Yeah, fair enough. So that 60 minutes video interview, I'm pretty sure it was about 10 years ago that it was done.
Yep. Yep.
And it was done at the Institute of Neurological
Recovery.
Recovery,
Yep.
and that's in Florida. And the
Hmm.
doctor's name is
Tobinick.
Dr. Tobinick. And the interview pretty uh, was pretty cool because you got to see patients go through the process, and then you got to see
Yes.
the before and the after. The interviewer interviewed them, and now on the Institute of Neurological Recovery YouTube channel, there's a whole bunch of those stories where
Yeah.
patients have been. They are having a discussion about their deficits and what the challenges are. They are shown having the procedure, and then they have some time to recuperate from the procedure, and then they are interviewed about the benefits, and some of them have amazing results uh, immediately after
Yes.
the procedure.
Yes.
And there's it's in Florida, and there's a few people who are a bit skeptical about things that
Yes.
happen in Florida as far as medical procedures, because their laws are a little bit more relaxed than in some other parts of the United States.
Yep.
And uh, when you ask somebody on the internet about, especially on my Instagram page, or when I asked some people about etanercept ages ago, there was a little bit of hesitation. Some people said it's okay. Some people thought that it was just a little bit of a scam, to put
Snake
it,
oil. Yep.
yeah, to put it
Yep.
bluntly. So tell me about your first approach to the team. and what that was like, how you started the conversation.
Um, well, really, because I'm an academic, come from an academic background, my first instinct after seeing the video was to look up any research, any medical papers, anything I could find. Um, and I found a lot of papers by Tobinick, which were good, but I didn't want to necessarily take his word. So then I found some independently researched papers, some independent studies done in Australia and New Zealand, and realized that, yeah, this this actually, people were getting the same results here and in Australia as they were getting in Florida. So I sent an email to the institute, and um, filled out a questionnaire and a medical form um, about my stroke. And then the next thing was they booked an online consultation. And in the meantime, I had to have a whole series of blood tests done. I had to forward my medical reports of my stroke. Um, and yeah, and it went from there.
Okay, that's pretty easy. So you're in New Zealand, you got a list of bloods that they wanted you to get some blood work done on.
Yep.
You had that done first, you got the results, you sent it across, and then was there another discussion after that? Was there some kind of a discussion about the process or the procedure or what was next?
Yes. Yeah, so once they get all the information, they book a consultation, and then you have about 45 minutes to an hour with the doctor, and he tells you about the procedure, and like he answers all your questions and everything like that. Um,
Okay, so there's a lot of upside. What are the risks? Was there any risks that you were made aware of that you found in the research that you needed to be aware of?
um, Actually, etanercept is a drug that's used for arthritis.
Mm.
So it's normally injected into joints, and what it does is it reduces inflammation, and makes life more bearable. And people that are having it done for that reason have to go on a long course of treatment of etanercept for months. Um, and if you have etanercept for that long, it can make you susceptible to infections, and particularly reactivate certain infections if you've had them before. Like I think tuberculosis was one of them.
Reactivate it.
Yeah.
Wow.
um, but because people etanercept for stroke, you only have a maximum of 3 shots, and they're the first two are done a week apart, and the third one's done a month after. Um, because it's so few shots, um, there's no side effect, and it either works or it doesn't. So you either have a result or you don't. That's yeah. So the fact that there were no known bad reactions to this drug. Um, and obviously, you have to sign a waiver saying,
Medical
you're aware
waiver.
of, yeah. Um, but I mean, I've signed those for everything. So, every procedure I've ever had that's, had potentially devastating side effects. So, but yeah, the fact that I would either have, have a good result, or I would have no result, was good. I could live with that.
In the description, when you type etanercept into Google, you get a answer. Etanercept is a medication used to manage and treat autoimmune conditions such as plaque psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, juvenile idiopathic arthritis, and ankylosing spondylitis.
Hmm.
They're all seems like they're all degenerative diseases related to bones and bone structures.
Yep.
Um, but it doesn't say that it's for use in
Stroke.
stroke.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so that's kind of I think where the
Yeah. Yeah.
challenges lie. Is
And
that
that's where some people get nervous, um, because it is an off-label use for that medication. Tobinick is the only one that does the treatment. And like I said, there have been studies done here and in Australia where people have had the same, benefit from it. But they're just really slow adding it to the list of stroke recovery medications or treatments.
Okay. So you're gone through the initial discussion, you've delivered your bloods, they've looked at your bloods and they've said you're a candidate. What did they say?
Yes.
How does it go from there?
So, obviously, one of the bloods is to see if you've ever been exposed to tuberculosis,
Oh,
because I don't want that to be reactivated. And mine came out negative. So, once they've got all that information and they've seen what kind of stroke I had, how long ago I had it, and stuff like that, they then say, okay, yep, you'll be a great candidate for this, and they lock you in time for the initial shot.
okay.
So I think I had my consultation in September last year, and the first available appointment was February the 2nd. So that's what I took.
Okay. So then you've decided to go for it. Did you make the
Yes.
decision quick? Were you, that's it, you
Yeah.
were there?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I need to know in my heart that I have done everything possible. And if it didn't work, then at least I know. But I had to know that I'd done everything possible to help my recovery.
Yeah, cool. You make a booking, you choose your flight, you choose the accommodation. What is it like going on this trip? What are you thinking? How are you processing this whole time? Because it's not a holiday. You're not going to a beautiful, warm destination where you're going to kick back and enjoy the sun, have a few Chardonnays or whatever. It's a very different idea. The traveling is for a specific purpose. Are you completely, totally set in your mind that I've got to go get a result? I must get a result. I have to get a result. Like, what were you thinking?
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
I'm just going to back up a little bit. So, this the treatment itself was not cheap. It's very expensive, and so I had to crowdfund for it because
Okay.
there's no way I could afford this treatment when I'm not working.
Okay.
So
Can you tell me how much it cost?
yeah, sure. So the injection itself is $8,400 US. The consultation is $1,000. And subsequent injections are $8,400. So and that's US. So when you factor in the exchange rate and then the flights and everything else, it really does mount up the cost of having this done.
So 3 injections at $8,400.
Yeah, no, I never had 3, but
Did you have
yeah,
2?
yeah. So yeah,
Yes.
it mounts up.
So the procedure, just the procedure, the 2 injections and the travel is somewhere in the vicinity of about 18,000 US dollars.
Hmm.
Okay.
And then, factor in the exchange rates for New Zealand dollars in my case, or Australian dollars in yours, and the cost mounts.
Yeah. To AUD, it's 27,000 Australian dollars. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I hear you. It's not something that everybody can manage to fund, for sure.
Oh, and I definitely had to crowdfund for that amount because I didn't even have close.
I love the fact that you did that. So how does it feel to put that out there? Because in one of the chapters in my book, I talk about the things that people need to access to improve their recovery, right? And I know that things to help people improve their stroke recovery is always expensive. And one of the things I suggest is that they jump on, find a crowdfunding provider, and run a crowdfunding campaign.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like for you to go through that in your mind that you're going to ask people for money to help you do this?
My initial reaction is to not want to do that.
Mm.
But I realized that this was really important to me. I really need to do this, and this is the only way I could do it. So, so that's why and how I started it. And literally I started raising funds, I think the same day I had the consultation. So when I knew that I was a candidate, when I knew that I had a date booked in, that day I set up the crowdfunding.
How long did it take you to raise the money, or did you raise all the money?
Yeah. So it took me 5 weeks. And initially it was very slow. And in the end, someone was very kind and donated like the bulk of the money.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you know who that somebody was?
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. That's an amazing gift, isn't it?
It really, really was an incredible gift.
Now, I love that idea that you reached out, you overcame your, your inability to really ask for help. And especially in this way, asking for money for a trip to do something like this. It
Yeah.
seems selfish, but it's actually very selfless to do that, I think. And it's actually a very amazing thing that you did, is go out and seek help and ask for support in this way. And what you're doing is you're not putting a gun to anybody's head. You're just saying, hey, this is what I'm planning to do. If you can help out, help out. This is what the money's going to go towards. And nobody's obliged to do anything. If they want to,
Yes,
they can.
that's right.
And that's what I love about it, right? We need to overcome the barrier of how it feels to supposedly ask for help.
Ask for help.
Yeah, everyone is entitled to be helped, to have help, and everyone's entitled to go after the best recovery they can go after. And in this day and age, with the fact that we can raise funds through these services, I think it's so important that we utilize that service and
Yep.
ask for help. And just even if you raise half the money or a third of the money or a tenth of the money, it doesn't matter, as long as you're being creative about that and you're being honest about what you're going to do with the money, and then you're being honest with the whole process. I think it's really important that we encourage people to ask for help more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
So
That's always been hard for me. I've always found it hard to ask for any help, even with my stroke recovery. So that was a big step for me, was doing that. But I just knew how important it was.
brilliant, brilliant. So you've raised the money. That's a really huge thing, right? You're excited, I imagine.
Yep.
What are the emotions, the feelings that you're going through when that happens?
I mean, I was elated when I had all the money and I could buy the ticket and I could, pay the for the treatment. That was like it just, I was really excited. But also with Etanercept, the way that it works is it reduces inflammation on the brain. So when you have a stroke, you get chronic inflammation, and it's inflammation that causes a lot of deficits. So if you have the inflammation, Etanercept's going to work, fantastically for you. But sometimes you don't have much, and the deficit's caused by actual brain damage from the stroke. So, and it's hard to know, whether it's your deficits are caused by the inflammation or by brain damage. So it's kind of a gamble.
Mm,
And I kind of I felt going there, and and when I arrived there, I felt, wow, what's going to happen if nothing happens? Like I was saying to everyone and to myself, I'm going to accept whatever happens. But I knew deep down I'll be really gutted if nothing happened. And
yeah.
I've traveled all that way, halfway around the world, and there's no result.
Yeah,
That
you got your heart set on it. You're thinking about all sorts of things related to what you will be able to do, what you hope you're going to be able to do, how you hope it's going to feel, all the improvements you hope to get, and then there's that niggling thing in the back of your mind that goes, you might not get anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I would feel like a fraud because, I've asked all these people for money, for help, and nothing happens.
No result. Yeah.
Yeah.
The people donating, are they aware that there's a possibility of no result? Have you set that? Uh, have you given that information to them so that they know that you're going to go there? And what happens if you come back with nothing?
Yeah. I mean, I had written and I'd done some videos that sort of explained that how Etanercept worked, and that there were no negative side effects. It either works or it doesn't. And I won't know you know, until I've tried it.
Yeah. You know what you said was interesting, that it helps decrease inflammation. One of my main goals during my stroke recovery was to reduce inflammation in my brain.
Hmm.
And the reason is because I was on dexamethasone, which is a steroid that helps to reduce inflammation. And it's also used by people who have arthritic conditions. And it does reduce the inflammation in the brain, and it helps recover the brain and heal the brain, but it has a whole bunch of side effects. Um, typical steroid side effects: anger, um, weight gain, inability to sleep, a whole bunch of things. And it was terrible to be on. And because it was so terrible, I just decided to Google, back in 2012, I decided to Google how to decrease inflammation in the brain, and nutrition came up as
Mm.
the main ingredient, the main way to do that, right? So some foods were going to make inflammation in the brain worse. Some foods were going to make inflammation in the brain better. And what I know now is that if I ate, for example, pasta or bread, that they tend to be inflammatory foods, for lack of a better word. And what they do is they kind of switch on the inflammation in my brain, and they make me more fatigued, more tired. They make my deficits worse. And it's kind of like this dance. If I can avoid having bread or pasta, that particular, and sugar, for example, is another one.
Yeah.
If I can avoid having those foods, I don't notice my deficits so much. They're still there. I still feel my arm the way that it feels, and my leg the way that it feels. But it kind of allows me to settle things down, which means that the deficit inflammation is temporary, right? So in a minute, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how um, etanercept. Well, actually, let's talk about it now. It decreases inflammation, but from my understanding, is that inflammation can be reactivated by me, for example, doing the wrong thing and eating the wrong foods. What happens in this instance? It's designed to reduce inflammation, but then does it last?
Hmm. Yeah, it does.
Okay,
Um,
let's leave it at that. It
yep.
lasts. All right. So the day of the flight comes.
Yep.
Who did you travel with?
Air New Zealand to Houston, and then United to Florida.
On your own or with anyone else with you?
Nope, I went with my husband. Um, I definitely needed to have someone with me. I can't navigate. Well, I couldn't navigate airports alone. I had to
Because
have a whole sensory overload. So
uh-huh.
I had to have headphones to block out the sound, wheelchair support, um, um, lorazepam on hand just in case. It was, yeah, it was a bit of a mission to get me there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You arrive in Houston, and
Yep.
then you've got a connecting flight to Florida.
Well, no, we didn't actually, because my husband's actually American.
Oh,
So we flew to Houston and then flew on to Memphis and stayed with his family for a week. So we got there the week before the shot, and then we flew down to Florida the day before the shot. I had the injection in the morning, and then we flew straight back to Memphis that afternoon, and spent another week with his family. So it was nice that way. It was yeah, it was really good to see the to see the family.
it was less rushed. Therefore, you guys had to pay for less accommodation. You got to see the
Yeah,
family.
yeah,
Combined all of that. That's cool. So the day comes, you jump in the plane again to go to Florida.
yep.
Is
And
the tension building up?
well, yeah, because American airports are notoriously bad to navigate, and even worse when you're dealing with all the deficits from stroke. So yeah, the flight down there was, oh, I was really anxious, and then we were delayed, and um, we were supposed to get in at lunchtime on the day before, and we got in at 1 a.m. or something. So it was just, it was, yeah, it was a nightmare getting there. And I really thought, is this a sign? Like, is the universe telling me not to do this? Because we just, it was so hard.
I love it. My favorite philosopher from back in the day, Marcus Aurelius, had this line which said was the obstacle is the way. So for me, it would have been a sign that that was the way to your particular uh, goal there. The obstacles
Yeah,
or the challenges or the problems meant that you were on the right path.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah.
You arrive in Florida, and then what? Do you go to your accommodation? Do you go to directly to the clinic? What happens then?
Okay, so we got to Florida at midnight, and we went straight to the hotel. We got there about 1 a.m. and then we had to get up at 6 the next morning to get out to the clinic because we were about 40 minutes drive. So we had an Uber out to the clinic next morning. My appointment was at 8:30 in the morning. So yeah.
The appointment, you go to the appointment, you see the medical staff for the first time. What's that like? What's the welcoming procedure like?
It was really, really interesting actually. So the very first thing that happened was a COVID test. We got COVID tested, and then we went through. We were obviously both negative. And we went through, and I had about 2 hours of cognitive functions testing. Now,
Okay.
I never had cognitive functions tests here after the stroke. In fact, I hadn't had one since I had the brain tumor. So that in itself was fascinating because I learned of other deficits I had from these tests that were discovered
That you weren't
here.
aware of.
Yeah, like I had aphasia.
Okay. Okay. That's interesting. Definitely interesting because I know what that's like because I had after the second bleed in my brain, I had a lot of deficits, cognitive function deficits. I, for example, the ones that I know impacted me was sometimes I couldn't remember to begin or start a sentence. Sometimes I couldn't remember who came to visit me. You know, my timeline was all messed up. I had no idea. I couldn't work. I couldn't type an email. I couldn't do any of that stuff. Like there was a whole bunch of problems. And I remember going to my psychologist and saying to her that I had all these troubles. And she said to me, has anyone done a neuropsych assessment?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, what's that? And she was the first person who introduced me to neuropsychologists and told me that you should go and see somebody and get assessed because they'll give you a cognitive function test. And that was the first time I realized that maybe we need to look into this a little further, and nobody
Yeah.
had mentioned it to me either. And it
Yeah.
turns out I had some deficits in that space, and then they went away.
It just boggles my mind that, we have like a traumatic brain injury,
Mm.
and no one is testing our cognitive functions. I can't get my head around that's something that they don't do. But then, anyway, they discovered I had anomic aphasia. So that meant that, for example, if I was told to name all the words starting with S, I couldn't. So, um, that was one of the tests I had to do. In a minute, name all the words starting with S, and I could like say 2 words, and then I'd be going and that was it. Even my last name, Stops, I didn't say. My husband name, Sean, like I didn't say, and he's looking at me going, you know, and I'm it was amazing. And like I think there was 3 letters that I had to do that with, and all of them was the same. I just sat there going, "Mm." I couldn't think of any words. It was
Um,
yeah, it was really amazing. Um and that they tested to see how much function my right hand had, and um it was so actually good having those tests and getting like a really clear idea of what my deficits were and how, how bad they were.
mm. So it's obviously to gauge where you're at, get a baseline,
Yeah.
so that they can then determine the impact of the intervention of the medical procedure, right? Of the
Yeah.
shot.
Yeah.
Um, so that's taken about 2.5 hours. Are
Yeah.
you totally exhausted by then? How are you
Oh my
feeling?
God. I am so fatigued at the end of that time. I mean, I was trying not to cry because I was so exhausted. I just wanted to sleep. Um,
Mhm,
but then of course, like I was ushered through to the treatment room.
mhm.
Um, I think we had like 10 or 15 minutes where I was just sitting waiting. And then the next thing I was through in the treatment room. And there were other patients um, there as well having, second or third treatments done. So,
Yeah. Okay. Did you get to meet any of those patients? Did you speak to anybody in the waiting room or anything like that?
oh no, because we all had like separate rooms that we were
Mhm.
in. Yeah.
Okay. So then you're being taken into the treatment room.
Hmm.
Tell me about that procedure. How does that go?
The actual treatment.
Yeah, the process before you receive the injection, you're in the
Right.
treatment room, you've done the testing, you know
So,
where your baseline is.
yep. So up to then, I hadn't met Dr. Tobinick. I'd spoken to him online, but I'd never met him. I was with his medical staff beforehand, having all the tests done, and then he reviewed my results, and then he came in and we talked about, um, you know, my deficits and um, me, the fact that I'm a musician and what I'd hoped to to get out of the treatment, and um, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and then he told me like, well, this is what to expect, the feeling you when you get the injection, and where he does it and how they rotate me head down on the table.
What does it feel like when you get the injection? Is there some kind of
S-
a sensation that you notice?
There is. So he said that when you get the injection, because they do it in the back of your neck between the vertebrae, so it goes into your spinal fluid.
Uh-huh.
He said that some people feel the warmth from the medication going in, and a bit of a sting, and a metallic taste. Um, but to me, it felt hot when it went in. It stung like crazy, like a bee sting. And I definitely got the metallic taste. But as soon as he stops putting the fluid in, then that sensation stops. But it was uncomfortable, um,
Okay.
for sure.
So they're penetrating your spine
Hmm.
through two of the vertebrae.
Mm-hmm.
They're accessing the cerebrospinal fluid
Mm-hmm.
through your spinal cord,
Yep.
and they put an injection in. You have the feeling, and when they're putting the injection in, you're face down on a. Are you face down? Where are you?
No. So what I'm doing at the time is I'm just leaning forward and so exposing the back of my neck. And
Ah,
then once he's put the injection in, and the needle itself is so tiny, like I didn't feel the needle go in, it's just the medication. Then you lie back and then they rotate the chair so it's flat, and then so it's head down.
your legs
Um
are
s-
above your head height.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And your legs are strapped on so you don't slide off.
Yeah. And from my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, the reason that they do that is because they are wanting the medication to go through the blood brain barrier and into the
That's
brain. Is
correct.
that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So from injection, after the injection, immediately you're tipped backwards so that your legs are above your head.
Mhm.
How long are you in that position for?
About 3 minutes.
Okay. And in that time, are you noticing anything happening?
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
So the first thing I noticed when I was laying there was that my fatigue just dialed down. It was just like someone was taking a switch and going, fatigue's on 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and like within 3 minutes, all my fatigue had gone, and my need to to cry had gone. It was just gone. Um, so that was the first thing I noticed, and then they brought me back upright and sat me back up, and then I started noticing other things.
Uh-huh. What other things did you notice first?
Um, so the pain in my leg was the same. It was like someone taking this dial and dialed it down until it was gone. Um, and this is all within the first 5 minutes. Um, you could hear my speech getting better and better. Um, and I could start to feel my tongue in my mouth, and that sensation was so weird because I didn't realize that I had no feeling in the tip of my tongue, and suddenly it'd come back, and I had this great big tongue in my mouth. Um, and it was so off-putting. And even today, 6 weeks later, I had developed bad habits with my speech to compensate for the fact that my tongue was numb, and so I'm trying to undo those habits now. But yeah, that happened, and then they gave me a glass of orange juice for the metallic taste, and I took a drink of it, and the taste was just unbelievable. Like I didn't realize how my taste had been affected as well. Um, that I had lost some of my taste, and it just was like this taste was so bright. That's the only way I can describe it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
That makes sense. Oranges, sweet, bright. Okay, I get it.
yeah.
So you've noticed your tongue is back on board, fatigue's dialed down, that pain in your leg is dialed down. What else have you noticed?
Um, and then they asked me how my hand was, and so I started moving my hand, and like it doesn't feel like molasses anymore. I can move it freely. It's just really weak. And it still is, like it's getting stronger. Um, but yeah, I'm having to learn how to move it again. But at the time, all of a sudden, my hand was just not hard to move.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I noticed all those things happen within the first 5 minutes.
Uh-huh.
It was just amazing.
And then are you on your feet at all? When do you get on your feet? How soon are you on your feet?
So probably, um, so after I'd had the shot and I was back upright again, they put the camera on, and he talks to me about what I'm feeling and what I'm noticing. And then they do some of the cognitive tests again, like the aphasia test, and suddenly I can name all these words starting with S and T and other letters.
Mhm.
Um, and literally had jumped from like 2, in a minute to nearly, 30 words in a minute. It was just so quick. Yeah, it was it was so fast how it happened, how I got things back.
What's the husband saying? I would be an emotional wreck, actually. I'd be probably crying my eyes out if I was you by then. And I'd have everyone in the room, you know, off the deep end with me as well. Like,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
was he coping?
it was a bit like that. Yes, it was. Yeah, especially um when my hand could start to move, and we realized that now me being able to play my instruments again was actually possible. Um, that yeah, that was when things got really emotional.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, because having lost that ability for 2 years was was heartbreaking, and suddenly, you know seeing the light at the end of the tunnel was amazing.
What instruments were you an aficionado in before you became, before
Oh,
you had the stroke?
yeah, clarinet and saxophone and flute. Um,
Okay. Well, they're
so
very, very, I mean, I hate to say this way, but they're very handsy kind of
yes,
instruments, right? They
yes,
need all the dexterity, they need a coordination of all the fingers. It's a big job, right? So you realized that you're probably going to be able to somehow play it again. Is that what you realized?
yeah, yeah, because suddenly I could move my fingers like independently, which, you know, I mean, I could move my hand, a bit before the stroke, a bit before the shot, but my fingers would move like two at a time, or, you know, be pulled by other fingers, and my index finger was hardly moving at all. So suddenly, having all of my fingers back
Yeah.
was amazing.
Okay. So before they didn't have individual control, so to speak. They moved or didn't move together. They kind of had they were impacted by each other rather than
Yeah,
separate from each other.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and also my thumb wasn't rotating properly, so I had no pinch at all, and I need that thumb to be rotated to be able to put it behind the clarinet. Um, and now it's rotating. So
Okay.
yeah.
So then you're 5 minutes in. All these things have come back. All these things have recovered, dialed down. You're aware that some things are going to be possible that weren't possible before. And then what happens then after the first 5 minutes? What's the procedure like after that?
I think that's when they gave me the tests, or some of the tests again, where I was, scoring sort of low on the functions tests, and to see, how much improvement there was. Um, and then, yeah, once they had done those, and seen how much improvement there was, um, I yeah, that you sort of eh, sent on your way. Really, that's the end of it.
Okay. So why do some people need more than one shot?
It depends how severe the deficits are. So
Okay.
if the first shot works, and the deficits are really severe, then the second shot's going to help improve those. And then if they're really, really severe, then a third shot, like a month later, will take it to the next level again.
All in all, how many shots did you have?
2.
Okay. How long after the first shot did you have the second shot?
A week.
Okay. So
So
you're
we did the same thing, but this time, when we flew back, we didn't go back to Memphis. We went straight to Houston and then flew back to New Zealand. But there was I didn't get as much reaction or improvement after the second shot. I think because the first shot I'd done so much.
uh
Um,
Did you
really just
stay
kind of
in Florida for that second
no,
shot?
no, no. We did the same thing again. So we went down the night before, had the
Ah,
shot, and then the afternoon flew out.
okay.
So I mean, I could travel and everything. Coming back after the first shot was just, it was chalk and cheese. It was unbelievable.
Traveling, were headphones necessary? Were you having any sensory issues?
Nothing. I didn't have to have anything at all. It was incredible. So suddenly I'm at a busy airport with loads of people, flights delayed. Normally I'd be, doing everything I could to block my senses out. And I was just another annoyed customer because the flight was delayed. It was unbelievable
Typical.
how quick and how much change there was in just, the few hours getting there and then leaving.
How long does the flight from the United States take to New Zealand?
14 hours.
Okay. And what's that trip like normally when you were going there? What was it like to be in the plane for 14 hours?
Uh, yeah, it was horrible. Um, uh, I had to keep getting up and moving around because parts of me would seize up. Um, I had eye mask, headphones to block out sound. It was just, yeah, it was just. I took some sleeping tablets and tried to sleep for most of the trip because it was just, yeah, it was horrible. Coming back was great. It was a really enjoyable flight.
Enjoyable. You have got definitely you have changed 100%. If a flight for 14 hours is enjoyable, um, there's some going on there. So what you're telling me is you got back and then what happens then? You get back and tell me what,
Yeah.
because then you're navigating your house for the first time since the
Yes. And
medication.
yeah, that's the thing. Like, I couldn't wait to get back because I wanted to see how everything was going to feel. Um, and coming home, it felt like um, I was just picking up after 2 years where I left off.
Hmm.
Um, and that's been a good thing and a bad thing because I've been trying to do everything I could do exactly as before the stroke.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I can't because my right side is physically still really weak.
Yep.
Because it's been so, basically immobile for 2 years.
Yep.
And so I get physically tired, like exhausted, because I'm, doing everything I was doing before the stroke. Um, I've gone back to work for the first time since the stroke. Um,
Wow.
and even though I'm limiting myself to 2 to 3 days a week, um, you know, it's physically tiring. Um,
What kind of
and
work,
then
Andrew?
so relief teaching,
Wow.
um, and yeah, like the first day I did that when I got back here I was really stressed about it. And I didn't know how it was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to get alive in the class. I didn't know what's going to happen. And when it didn't, it was great. But you know, when when you're looking after kids for 5 hours a day and you're on your feet, that's even tiring when you don't have a stroke.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, like last week I did 3 days in a row, and by yesterday I was just like I was so physically tired.
Hmm.
I felt like I'd run a marathon.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
I can relate to that. Uh that's pretty normal for people who are getting back to work after stroke because it's a big adjustment.
yeah,
Um, under normal conditions, even if you haven't had an intervention like you've had, it's a massive thing to get being able to be used to dealing with all of the drama, all of the children, um, standing up, thinking, talking.
well, standing up was
Yeah,
I didn't even think about how difficult physically that was going to be because I hadn't been standing up for like more than 30 minutes. I wouldn't stand up for long periods of time
yeah, right.
prior to that shot, and suddenly I'm standing up for like 1, 2, 3, 4 hours,
Yeah.
and wondering why my legs start feeling like jelly. You know, it's just standing. You're just standing, Andrew, and why the hell can't you do that? But actually, you know, if you haven't been doing that for 2 years,
Yeah.
it's hard.
You got to retrain it, mate. And that the deficit that you're experiencing, that weakness, is something very common to a lot of stroke survivors. You know, one side is weaker than the other side. It does come better. I know my left side is a lot weaker than my right side, but recently I started the gym, and my fear was that I wouldn't be able to do free weights. So, for example, do dumbbell bench press.
Mhm.
I thought that for me, it was better to use a bar and to use one of those machines that are safer in my mind to do a bench press on, so that when my left arm gets weak, I was concerned that I would drop the weight on my
Yep.
left arm when it
Yep.
fatigues. And I also thought that I wouldn't be able to hold the bar level and in a balanced position. But it turns out that after a long time and being gentle with the recovery and starting out on the machines that are supported, and then doing very light weights and just getting good at the movements, that you're bringing, I was bringing that left side up back online, back online, just teaching it a process, and then with the weight was the correct weight for my left side to get to 10 repetitions, for example, 3 times.
Mhm.
It's a bit light for my right side,
Mhm.
but it doesn't matter because I'm not trying to lift the heaviest weight possible. I'm trying to rehabilitate my left side
Yep.
while I'm working on the right side. So so that comes like the 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 strength does come back in time, and it just requires rehabilitation. That's all. And when you've
Yep.
just put something, it's like a car. If you haven't started the car for 2 years and it's just been sitting in the driveway, it's going to chug and it's going to feel a little bit different as everything starts to get lubricated and
Yeah.
warm up again. And I find that my left side works better on the second and third rep than it does on the first rep. The first rep is kind of
Reminding what to
reminding,
do.
yeah, and then it starts getting better. And then with the second set, the left side seems to know, oh yeah, we've done this, we know what to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then we're good to go. And I get more confident with the second and third sets as well. So
Yep.
it's interesting. So you'll get there, but I imagine, you know, you have expectations, even though you've had the injection, even though you've noticed these benefits, you still have expectations of yourself, and you want to get back to normal processes and normal life as quickly as possible. And now you're just kind of finding where the threshold is and how
Yeah.
to step back a little bit to give yourself recovery and recuperation time.
Yeah. So, firstly, the drug keeps working for about 6 months.
Uh-huh.
So you see improvement over 6 months, and you don't have to have follow up shots. Like I'm not going to have to do this every year or every couple of years. Like that's it.
Mhm.
But I have found this kind of distance with, now that my mind is clear, now that I don't have cognitive fatigue, now that I don't have sensory overload, um, I'm thinking that I can just go back exactly to where I was 2 years ago. Um, but in reality, like there's things are changing like almost daily. Like
Yeah.
with my speech, that's changing as my tongue's learning how to articulate words. My arm and my hand are changing all the time, and so it's just, yeah, there's there's so much newness that I have to get used to, while things are settling in. The only thing that I have really left over from the stroke is the muscles on the right side of my face um automatically break into a smile when I'm emotional.
Mm.
whether happy or not, they'll just creep up, it, which is really interesting. And that's the only thing now that I have left um, from the stroke. Everything else seems to be falling into place, or like you said, coming back online.
Are you seem comfortable moving, I think, is it your left side right now when we've been talking for about an hour, and your right side doesn't get a lot of use. Is that just because
Habit,
yeah,
habit. Yep,
okay.
I am constantly reminding myself, and Sean's reminding me as well, to use my right hand and to use my right side more. And you know, like when I'm in the kitchen, for example, I will constantly think, I've got to use my right hand to pick up the cup, or to pick up a plate, or to grab the cutlery, to get used to picking it up. But then in other situations, like here in front of the computer, I forget again, because I'm so used to just doing everything left-handed.
Right, right.
So yeah.
Have you been able to pick up the instruments? I imagine it's not
Yes.
as beautifully performed as before.
No, but it's incredible. When I pick up, especially the clarinet, because that was my first instrument, and put my fingers on it, my right hand just goes straight to where it should go. It just remembers. It knows exactly what it has to do, and I can like move it on the keys like 3 or 4 times, and then my fingers get too fatigued, and my hand starts to creep up, and then I have to stop. But it just feels like holding the clarinet feels like putting on a really old, comfortable jumper. It's just feels so natural,
Mhm.
and so good. Um, but I was going to say, we got back home from the States the day before Valentine's Day, and Sean said to me that day, "This is the best Valentine's Day present I've ever had, having my husband back." And I was kind of hurt when he said that. And I said, "I didn't realize I was gone." And he said, "Yeah, yeah, you were a different person. And now you're back. You're back to who you were." Um,
Yeah.
and that was really emotional.
It makes sense because the partners, family members are dealing with how they experience you after stroke as well. And
Yeah.
they are mourning their own losses about you, your relationship, how you went about life. And they're probably also thinking, oh, why couldn't we just go back together and everything was the same as it was before? Because I know stroke survivors who have said that, I've said that. And then my wife has said that in not so many words. She's said, man, wouldn't it just be good not to have any of this shit to deal with? And it's like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But, we have to deal with it now.
But I also think it was mainly the fatigue and the sensory overload and
Yeah.
emotional regulation, like all of those things we had to factor into everything that we did, every
Yeah.
decision we made.
Yeah.
And suddenly we're back home, and like we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about Andrew having a meltdown.
Yeah. We went through similar things, we'd be away overseas on a holiday or what have you. And I'd say to Christine, count me out today. Do whatever you need to do. Go and see
Yeah.
whatever you need to see, but I'm out. I'm going to just chill out in the hotel room or by the pool or at a cafe. I don't want to be involved in any of it because I can't. And, that's not, it's not fun to be overseas and not be able to do something, for example, right? Some people obviously go through that at home. I couldn't go to particular parties and events and all the things that people invited us to go and do and see. You have to not go. Sometimes you have to
Yeah.
heal and recover and not make it worse.
Well, it's interesting because the day after we got back from the first shot, to Sean's family, we went to a family dinner with his extended family, and there was 21 people in the house for this dinner, from babies right the way through to elderly, and it was so noisy and there was so much happening. And if that had happened 2 days before, I would have lasted about 3 minutes in their house because
Yep.
it was so much to do. And I was just loving it. I was enjoying it so much.
Yep.
Meeting all
Yep.
the people and chatting, and it was just so it was so remarkable how I could go from not being able to tolerate that to being able to tolerate that in a matter of 24 hours.
Yeah.
And some people who are skeptical of this treatment have said, "Oh, it's placebo,"
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I can't see how that could be placebo because
No, I don't think.
it's so major. It's such a big thing.
But it's also got some really good results with helping people with arthritic conditions and decreasing inflammation in joints. So it's not placebo. Like it wouldn't work on arthritis in that way.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. There's
you can't get rid of when arthritis has done damage to a joint, cartilages, and all that kind of stuff. You can't undo the damage. You can only it's like a brain, right? When we get a brain injury, the injury doesn't go away in the
no.
spot where it's injured. The inflammation around the area is another thing. But same thing with a bone that's injured. When the bone has become injured, the injury, the scarring, or whatever you want to call it, is still
Yep.
going to be there. The wear
Yep.
and tear.
Yep.
So what it does is it decreases the inflammation signals around it, so it can reduce the pain that people are suffering. It doesn't
Yep.
take away the damage.
What I noticed when I was doing my research leading up to this, and going online and asking people in stroke groups, if they'd had the treatment and about it, and there was a small group of people that were really against it, and really, like, one person in particular was really quite aggressively, discouraging me. Um, because he said, "Oh, no, people pay all this money and nothing happens." Well, you're told that from the start, like, either works or it doesn't, and this is why. So if it doesn't work, it's not because it's a scam. It's because you don't have, inflammation. You have brain damage.
Mm,
Um,
mm. It's very important for people to understand that the damage is the damage. Once it's there, it's there. You're not getting it back. If that means that the damage has caused you not to be able to walk, well, then that's not going away. Etanercept and Etanercept is not
no, it can't
reversing
fix
the
it.
damage.
No.
It's
So
allowing other parts of the brain that have been inflamed and not operate properly to operate better.
yeah, yeah. Um, and so, you know, there's people now who I'm talking to online who are asking me about the procedure and the process, and making a decision whether or not they're going to have it. And it really is like, for me, the decision was like, regardless of what happens, I have to know I've
Mm,
done everything. So
yep.
I'm prepared to gamble. I'm prepared to take that risk.
Is there any follow-up now with clinic?
Yeah, I've got some paperwork I have to fill out in a couple of weeks just to see how I'm progressing. Um, but other than that, if I feel like, in a couple of years I want to have the third shot, or then I'll do it.
Oh,
Um, I'll just, I'll see how much the improvement makes.
so that's
Um,
still still an option. It's a possibility.
yeah, yep. Um, But then again, it just depends how much progress I make now
Hmm.
over the next couple of months. I mean, I've made such a huge amount of progress, and like I said, I've just got to be careful of not burning myself out, because I really am, like,
Going after
going
them.
back and doing things exactly as I was doing them. Like, it's funny, the the school I was at doing a relief, um, like, when I came back, when I started up again, was the school I was at the day before my stroke. And so it literally was like nothing had happened for 2 years. I just went from that Friday to this Monday, and it's 2 years later. I'm doing the same thing again. It was really bizarre.
Like a 2 year gap of stuff.
Yeah, it's like the last 2 years didn't happen,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I
they
can't
did.
imagine what that's like. One of the biggest challenges with me helping people get through stroke is often struggling with what do we tell people about? How do we bring information to people? What
Yeah.
kind of things do we talk about? Getting doctors to talk on the podcast, it's almost impossible. People don't really want to talk
Yes.
about
Yes.
that kind of stuff, which is really strange and bizarre that you can't get people to talk about it. But I understand all the medical implications to that. What I loved is when you reached out and said, can we tell the story of what my experience was with Etanercept? And I thought, that's something that we really need to do. It's going to make a big difference to a lot of people listening about whether they go or don't go, and whether they, like you, want to know yes or no. Did it work or didn't it work? And that they're going to go after recovery. I want to encourage people who are listening to um, go back and listen a couple of times, get comfortable with the process that Andrew had to go through, and understand the implications of going there, the potential results that you might or might not get, the funding, the cost that's associated to this, and how to go about raising those funds. Really important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's about it from me. Like, I really appreciate you reaching out and sharing this story, because it was a gap in the knowledge base that was there that people were asking me about, and I couldn't deliver them a piece of content that had at least one person's version of events, and then sort of dispelled some of those myths as well about.
Yeah. Yeah, because the only videos you can find are the ones that are done on their website. And
Yeah.
so and so it's for me, it's important to talk about this to people and to answer questions and to, you know, to be available, to be a resource because um, I'm not sitting in the treatment room now and having a video done. I'm like just I'm talking to you. I'm
Yeah.
telling you exactly what it was like for me. And I wish that was available to me when I was trying to make a decision
And let me
as to whether
just
or not.
say, not that we have to, this is not a paid endorsement. We are not doing a plug
No.
for the clinic or anybody like that. We are two
Mm.
stroke survivors, or one who was curious enough to go ahead and get the procedure done, and one who's curious because I want to get information out to people and give them something to consider. And
Yep.
even thinking about it for myself. That's the other interesting part of this, is that for me, it's a really important conversation because I need to consider the possibilities of how this might support me. That's one thing I haven't asked you is it a procedure that can be done for anybody who's had a neurological injury? Does it have to be a stroke survivor? Does it have to be a ischemic stroke or hemorrhagic stroke? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, the type of stroke, it doesn't matter. If there's inflammation caused by it, then it's going to help. With other brain injuries, I think they do other brain injuries. If you've got inflammation, this this drug's going to help.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Excellent, man. Congratulations. Thank you for coming on
Thank
and
you.
sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I wish you uh, a great recovery and continued success. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been really good talking to you.
Well, thanks for joining us on today's episode. This was an episode that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. A lot of people have contacted me and reached out if I knew anybody or had understood what it's like to receive Etanercept. Now that you've listened to the interview, I encourage you to do your own research, make up your own mind, and understand fully what it is that you might need to go through to get to consider the possibility of uh, requesting the procedure from Dr. Tobinick. This is not a paid or endorsement of the clinic. I do not suggest that anybody listens to any of this information on the podcast and takes my advice or Andrew's advice. Please do your own research and investigation and make your own decisions. And hopefully what this has done is just given you some things to consider and some things to understand that you didn't understand before. So for everybody listening, if you liked this episode, please do hit the like button, share the episode, let other people know about it, get the conversation started, because that's what we need more of. We need to hear more about the solutions that are possible for stroke survivors. And this might make a difference to somebody else's recovery. If they're able to find this interview and listen to it, it might improve their quality of life. It might allow them to get back to work. It may allow them to just get through recovery a little bit better. Thanks to everybody who always tunes in, listens, leaves me comments, reviews. The podcast lives and thrives because of the reviews that people leave, whether it's on Spotify or on iTunes. So if you'd like to leave a review, please do go ahead and leave a review and some words about what the show means to you. The show is growing. I get feedback from people every single week about what the show means to them and what it was like when they discovered the show and how it made a difference in their recovery, how they don't feel alone and how they feel understood and feel like they've found a community. And that's exactly what I was trying to achieve. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And I am truly grateful and truly and deeply appreciate everybody who listens and interacts and contacts me and leaves comments. Thank you.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.